everybody. How y'all doing this afternoon? Well, I'm here and it's cold. And it's about to get a whole lot colder. So they say. I've been praying hard. I'm hoping this mess is going to bypass us. I'm praying we're going to get a Passover. But either way, we're going to survive. Whether that be that we get the Passover or just God gives us the strength to endure, we're going to get through it one way or another. Anyway, I'm here to give a message on 1 Samuel 5. I'm braving the cold for y'all today. But I wanted to make sure that I got this message in because I don't know if it may be a few days before I get another message out. So, if we lose power, we're gonna lose connection. So, we'll see what happens. The message today, 1 Samuel 5, fallen idols, where the king's presence invades. This chapter this chapter is as I told y'all before, the last chapter about the Philistines, and they took that ark, and they captured the ark. Well, and I told you that capture was really an infiltration of sorts. Israel thought they could use the ark as a lucky charm and manipulate God that way, and the Philistines thought that they could manage him, and even though they were afraid, they said they was going to fight hard against the Israelites because of their God, and they was afraid that God was going to overtake them, but they was afraid then, but then they forgot quick that God that dealt with them Egyptians, that's the one they was dealing with, and they thought though they could manage it. So they captured the ark, and it seems to be this defeat for Israel, but it's not a defeat for God. Israel was defeated and the ark was captured, but they didn't defeat God. So this reveals how God is never a hostage. He is sovereign king who fights his own battles, even in the heart of enemy territory. The Philistines, they take the ark to the Ashdod, and there was this temple there in Ashdod to their god Dagon. And Dagon was this god that was he was like a half man, half fish type god. And it was their chief deity, and they took the ark there. They considered this a trophy. We captured the ark. We captured Israel's. We captured their god. Blah blah blah. And they took the ark, and they put it in this temple with their god. And what ensues is a tragedy, but it's a comedy of sorts in a way. That's one of those things, like, I laugh at some of these things in Bible, especially, like, Acts chapter 5 is hilarious. And this is another one of the chapters, if you think about it, the whole scenario, it's kind of funny. Kind of like Eli falling off that seat backwards. Anyway, so first thing that happens is they put the ark in there with their god Dagon, and they leave and they come back, and when they come back, the Dagon, the statue of Dagon, fell down on his face in front of the ark. And so they go over there and they get their statue Dagon and they set him back up. Their God has no power. He has to be set back up with human hands. Israel gods put him on his face, and they had to go over there and set him back up with their own hands. And so they leave, and then they come back. And the second time they come back, he's fell down again, but this time he's chopped in pieces. It says in the chapter, it says that there wasn't nothing but a stump left. That meant it was his fishy part. It was his tail. It was severed. His head, his hands, everything was chopped apart, and it was just the tails standing there. And the head and the hands was laid off of the threshold, it said. This reminded me of Deuteronomy, which says, God will make you the head and not the tail. This was symbolizing the reason his head and his hands was cut off, was symbolizes that this God had no wisdom to plan and no power to act. Then it says that they were scared. They said, "What we're going to do with the Ark of God? What we're going to do with it?" And they tried that because they started being afflicted. It said the city was started to be under heavy affliction by the God. The God was their hand of God was heavy upon them. It said, there was a sickness that started to happen, and they wanted to remove the ark and get it out of there. They wanted to get it out of there. What are we going to do with it? We got to get it out of here. But the thing about it, the tragic but funny part about it is what they were afflicted with. It says that they were afflicted with emeralds. The men of the city were afflicted with emeralds in their secret parts. Now, there's some debate over what emeralds means. It basically means tumors or bulls. And they don't know what the cause of this. Now, it says that the men that didn't die, they had that they were afflicted with that. And so there's this. Traditionally, it's thought that they had some really, really bad case of hemorrhoids. But there's been modern interpretation that possibly this may have been but something kind of like a bubonic plague of sorts, because there was people dying from it. But if you think about it, if it was just hemorrhoids, it was some bad cases of hemorrhoids if everybody was dying from it. They were in some bad situation. It was bad enough that they was like, we got to get this thing out of here. We done messed with the wrong one. So they realize that they can't contain or control the God of Israel. And this attempt leads to their own destruction. This chapter proves that, firstly, that God does not need human defenders. He doesn't need anyone to defend him. He can defend himself. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't want us to stand up for him. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want us to speak for the cause of righteousness. He doesn't need us to. He doesn't need us to physically defend him. He doesn't need us to force. If it comes down to it, God can act. You know, if God means for an enemy to be defeated, that's another part of the inner race. He causes your enemies to be defeated before your face. Jehoshaphat didn't even have to lift they didn't even have to lift a sword. Their enemies were already defeated before they ever got there. While Israel was mourning the loss of the ark, God was busy conducting a victory tour through Philistia. He is not limited by geography, nor is he weakened when his people are unfaithful. Um, Dagon was, it also teaches us the futility of idolatry. Dagon was a god who had to be picked up by and put back in his place by human hands. This contrast is a sharp one, where the true God creates and sustains humans, while idols must be sustained by humans. This also represents the holiness of God's presence. The ark represents the glory of God. This glory is a consuming fire to those who treat it with irreverence. It's a consuming fire that's a bad fire for those that treat it with irreverence, like those hemorrhoids. But it's also a consuming fire for those that are on fire for God. It consumes them. The zeal of the Lord consumes them. That's a different fire for the faithful. So whether it is Israel using the ark as a lucky charm or Philistines using it as a trophy, God will not be manipulated. These events serve as a type or shadow of the work of Christ. Just as the ark appeared defeated when captured, Jesus appeared defeated on the cross. However, just as the ark entered the house of the enemy to destroy their God, Jesus entered the house of death, the grave, to disarm the powers of darkness and emerged victorious. It also shows Christ as the true presence. In the Old Testament, God dwelt among his people in the ark, and in the gospel, God dwells in his people through Christ, which is the living ark. And it also illustrates the breaking of the enemy. As Dagon's head was severed. If you think about it, the Philistines had another somebody else's head got severed too later on. King David severed that giant's head. This is Samuel. This is before. So this is kind of a foreshadowing of that. But also, it's also a foreshadowing of the gospel promise that the head of the serpent has been crushed by the seed of the woman from the beginning. It was in Genesis 3:15 that was the promise from the beginning. So there's these foreshadows with Dagon's head being severed, with Goliath's head being severed, of when Jesus would eventually crush the head of the serpent. Usually when we talk about an invasion, and we see it's seen as a threat, but in this sense, God invades the darkness, and that's the only way we're set free. As far as lessons for our spiritual growth, it teaches us about surrendering control. We often try to manage God like the Philistines or use him like the Israelites. But spiritual growth begins when we stop trying to put God in our temple and instead submit to his lordship. We can't put God in a box. But we can't allow him to, instead, in a physical temple, in a box, in a cage, but we can allow him to fill our temple, fill the temple that he makes. Instead of putting him in our own temple that we make, let him fill the temple that he made. It also teaches us how to identify our modern Dagons. We have to ask ourselves, what idols in our lives are we constantly having to pick up or put back in their place or fix. If we let God move, let God fill that temple that he made, and we let his presence move in our lives, Eventually our idols will fall. He'll expose them. He'll chop them up. It also teaches us that when it looks like the ark is captured, when our circumstances look like God has lost, that's when God is often doing his most powerful work in secret places where we can't see him. The Philistines sure had a rough time. They learned a hard lesson. We can submit our idols. We can take them down ourselves. Or God can pull them down. It might be easier if you lay them down. Y'all be safe. I love y'all. And hunker down, we'll get through. I'll see you when y'all see you.